Hello and welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Jo Wheatley, and my friend and co-host Zoe Hawkins.
Hi, everybody. We're bringing you an episode today about coach maturity. And the reason we want to bring this to you is that there is a continuum of how you grow and develop as a coach, and your experience of how you coach and who you are as a coach at the beginning of your coaching journey will be very different to how you evolve and grow and develop over time. And whilst that continuum isn't one straight line, there's lots of different phases and different experiences you can have. We wanted to just bring some flavor to this term, coach maturity, and help you to think about, well, where are you in your own development of coach maturity and what might that look like? So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, bringing some clarity to that and recognizing that even if you're not in coaching training, so you're a stage before that, you will already have coaching skills. We talk about this a lot. And so also think when you are considering, developing in those skills and in those areas, it's useful to have some sense of being able to measure your development in those areas. And so, whilst the coaching bodies have their own competency frameworks, that can sometimes get a bit confusing because they're all slightly different. And before you start coaching training, you might not even know that coaching bodies exist and that they have their core competency frameworks and their different levels of accreditation. It can all feel a little bit complicated. So today we're going to acknowledge that those frameworks exist, but also look at it through a little bit more everyday language. So if we start off with the idea really that coach maturity is really reflecting around how you evolve as a coach. And broadly speaking, that is moving from doing coaching to being a coach. So what that involves is things like your depth of presence, your level of self-awareness. We talk about that a lot in these podcast episodes. It involves your relationship with your ego, your relationship to control, to uncertainty or the unknown, your ability to work with complexity, ambiguity, obviously emotion. You will know that we are the creators of the emotions coaching competency framework and training. Coach maturity is also related to your commitment to ongoing reflective practice, your ethical integrity. And it also involves your developing understanding and ability to acknowledge and work with the systemic influences in the systems that your coaching clients operate in. So that was a lot.
As you were talking there, I was like, gosh, if I'm listening to this podcast, I'm thinking, how am I going to remember all of that?
Yeah.
And so I just want to bring my own kind of take on this, which I think is, in simplicity, I think it's acknowledging that you are never done as a coach. And we say this to many people who, approach us about training to be a coach with us, because there's always further you can go. There's always more you can learn, both about yourself and the way that you serve others or the way that you are with others. And I think coach maturity brings maybe a pathway to something that can feel uncertain. I certainly know at times when I've been on my, journey developing as a professional coach is wondering, what do I need now? And sometimes when I've done CPD programs and I've reached a phase where I'm looking for the next CPD program, but thinking, I don't really want to do one. And how come? It's because when I'm looking down the lens of the learning, it's not what I need at that moment. What I actually need is maybe some deeper reflective practice or a period of integration. So coach maturity from my perspective is acknowledging that there is a continual evolution of yourself as a coach, and that's something to look forward to and to be enriched by, not to be daunted by, because it's not a destination. I think that's what I'm trying to say. It's not like I have to be the most mature coach I can be, and when I do these things, I've made it, because I don't think it's that. I think coach maturity is is a continual evolution.
Well, and then you can kind of like look through the lens of, when you get to the stage of where you feel advanced, and actually that is the point at which you realize you know nothing.
Yes,
So, and but not only you realize it, but you accept that you know
you
nothing.
accept it.
Um, but that's maybe a little bit more of a existential lens, which I think is relevant, but also for those of you that appreciate or need something a little bit simpler, maybe we'll talk about three broad stages. So if you think about starting off as stage one is kind of moving from that novice coach into a competent coach. And so, what might that look and sound like? What would be the indicators of that? I think that's when you have a mindset of, "Am I doing this right?" So you're referencing other people's, view of that. So you might be practicing tools like the Grow model or the Clear model, tools like that, and the competency frameworks of the coaching bodies. That "Am I doing this right?" is also might come up with a strong focus on goals, because that's what you're initially taught. So maybe a bit more of a linear idealism around coaching. Clients starting here, by the end of the session they're going to have achieved their goal. But you might be experiencing anxiety about how you deal with silence, not having the answers, even though you know that coaching isn't about the answers, but yet you're sat with that kind of a feeling, that desire to have that a level of expertise that you don't feel that you have. So you might be heavily reliant on scripts or structures. And what you might be less aware of at this stage is an awareness of your own influence in the relational dynamics between you and the coachee. So you're more focused at this stage around doing the coaching. Am I doing it right?
And I
So
just want to bring that's okay. Like, that's not bad, because actually, when you are in that place where you are using structures and you are really thinking about the goal and making sure that you've got clarity with the goal, that's good coaching. That's why those models have been developed. That's why the competency frameworks point to the need to have a goal and the need for clear contracting. So if you're listening to this and you're resonating and or nodding along with, oh yeah, like, celebrate that, because it's not that that stage of coaching is bad. It's acknowledging that is part of the journey. Like, every coach is a novice at some point, and that can look different for different people. Some people might leverage more around the using frameworks and using goals, and some people might focus more on how to ask a great question. That's all fine. Like, a lot of that is about style and who you are. And I would also add, as well as like, am I doing this right? I think there's often a question of like, am I valuable? Am I any good? Am I giving enough value to the client? So there is, I think what we're saying is, there is like an essence of concern for yourself and your own ability within this stage. Again, all normal, because you are still learning. You're still learning and developing and settling into who you are as a coach and how you want to be in that relationship and the impact that you want to have. So yes, there is a stage of this sort of beginning or novice, and a bit like driving a car. You have to be thinking mirror, signal, maneuver before you're able to go out on the road without thinking about those things. It's a stage of coach maturity that you need to be in and grow from.
and I think it's a mirror of the experience you have in any new profession or with any new skill set. And so within that first stage, you've got right at the beginning, and then you've got that bit where actually you're feeling quite competent with that stage, and there's a new degree of confidence or comfort with that. Where might you go beyond that? Might be into the next stage, which is where you're starting to focus more around what's happening in the relationship with you and your client. So where you start to co-create the process with the client. So you might even consider that it's I'm not saying you're directive in the first stage, but maybe you're a bit more like, well, we need to do this and we need to, to do that. So you become a bit more, you become more non-directive. The focus is more on the relationship, building the trust, and also a real development of your relationship and your trust with your own intuition. So, and that's an art, and it can take time. So at this stage, you might be thinking about how are we being together right now? So less on am I asking the right questions at the right time? Those kind of questions, and more around how we being together right now, and what information, what wisdom is there that's going to support the client or be related to their goals. So you might be getting more comfortable with the value of silence in the conversation. You may be getting more comfortable with emergence, and we talk about this in our group and team coaching program. It's less scripted. It's getting more comfortable with the unknown, being able to sort of walk along with your client, and almost getting excited with the unknown and what might grow and develop out of that. So you're listening deeply, you are bringing empathy, you're noticing patterns. So you're noticing patterns in the things that your client is saying to you from one session to another, and more broadly beyond that. You've got an awareness of concepts like transference, boundaries, ethics are all there. So you have a deeper understanding of yourself as an instrument, is a way I would summarize that.
I think something that can really enable this particular phase of maturity is supervision.
Yeah.
So I remember when I started taking supervision really seriously, and I was, worked with a supervisor on a monthly basis, like regardless really of how many coaching hours I was doing. And this was something that really came into focus for me. It's like, who am I as a coach? How am I with my clients? Like, what is happening between us? What is in the space? And I was able to really see coaching in a different light, I
Mm.
think, in full color, rather than maybe just as I may have been focused on, or what should I do with my client next? I was using so much more information. And I would say this particular sort of stage of maturity is very creative. It's very peaceful, in a sense that going into those coaching sessions, yes, you've planned and prepared in a sense of I've reviewed my client's notes and I fully remember who they are and where they're at in their journey. And I'm, tuning into the essence of why we are working together. And then you sort of step into that session very focused, I think, on your presence and being grounded. Whereas I think, counter to that, preparation for a coaching session in the previous stage we were talking about is very much more like, right, what are some of the questions that I want to ask? What are some of the tools and activities that I've got in my toolkit that I can bring out should they mention this or mention that? And, looking meticulously perhaps at, some things that they said they wanted to do, so that it feels more pressured, I think, when you're in that novice stage to need to deliver a great service. So there's almost more acceptance, I think, in this phase of maturity, which is there are two players in this coaching space: me as the coach and the facilitator, the client as the owner and the member. And so how do we together co-create where the coachee wants to go, you know?
And I think it's also recognizing that what happens in the conversation together, in the space together, is a mirror or an echo of what's happening for that individual outside of that coaching space, or some echo of the past. It takes a lot of courage, I think, for a coach to be able to enter into and develop into this phase, because there's so many paradoxes really in coaching, because it's both like a letting go of everything you've worked so hard to understand and develop, but also still drawing from that. Yeah, and that shift away from it's all about the coachee to it can kind of feel a bit selfish to then kind of bring yourself into the understanding of how that can support the client, which then leads into stage 3, which is where you're really engaging with the systemic nature of relationships and what it is to be human. And you can also think about this as you're leaning more and more into fully integrating everything you know, everything that you are, not just you as an individual. And you could say that this is the stage at which your mindset is, I am the work, which might, I think, feels oft, it's like, what? I thought, coaching is about helping the other person. But your focus here is really around the whole system, the client, you, the organization they're part of, the broader context, their culture, and your your mindset is really around the emergence. So what's wanting to emerge here?
I think in this stage, that not knowing piece really comes in. And it's present in the previous section, but from a previous section, it's present in the previous phase. And in this particular phase of development, sitting with your client when they don't know and you don't know, and knowing that that is the best place to be, and that everything else that needs to happen will happen from that place. And I think in the other phases of development, there's always certainly in the novice phase, that's disconcerting, to be a coach and not know, and for your client to not know. And then in the next phase, whilst you may be comfortable with it, you're still searching for a way to serve from that place. Whereas I think in this phase, you're like, okay, let's stay here.
Mm.
What's present in this place of not knowing. And I have asked my clients that, where some you just reach a point in the conversation and like, here's my question. And like, I don't know. And I might be like, do you know what? Like, yeah, I'm not sure I've got anything to ask right now either. So what's present now? Now that you don't know and I don't know. Like, and often then they're tapping into whatever feeling. Actually, it feels quite liberating. And what merges from there. So there is this sort of fertile creativity, this ground that comes from reaching a point of acceptance in that not knowing space.
Yeah, and we're talking about, as the coach, you've got grounded presence. And I think the groundedness sounds like it's a simple word, but it takes a lot, I think, to really be able to um, embody that. So you have humility. So where I talked earlier on about like the relationship to your ego, you've really got to, be able to let go of your ego a lot in this stage. So that in some ways it's about knowing what you might think of as like knowing when not to coach. So if you think about, some people would think of like the silence, I'm not really coaching if I'm not saying anything. You are coaching, you're still creating and holding that space for them, but you're actively coaching in a very different way. So you're not focused on the next question. You, in a way, you fade away. Your client is the center of what is happening there. And I read something today. It was about Bert Hellinger, and he's like one of the founders of systemic constellations. And his encouragement was to have no intention, especially to help. And I think it's such a great provocation. When you're listening, you think, how do you feel about that? Because so you and I talk a lot about, we love to help people, and people that come to coaching love to help people. And it's recognizing, we talk about, who is it? Who is the coaching helping the most sometimes? But these are some of the themes that you are going to bring and take and explore in supervision, because there's no quick and easy answer to it. But having this, these different phases can be helpful as a challenge for you. in your own reflections as a catalyst to your own reflections. You might not agree with them. You might have your own idea around what coach maturity is. Great. Like chat to your peers who are coaches about it, chat to your supervisor about it. So assessing your own coach maturity is about you taking the time to self-reflect, to be self-aware. You might find that you're a leader at the moment, and when we're talking through these coach maturity kind of phases, you're like, oh gosh, I go to HR all the time, like when I've got to have a conversation, and I always get frustrated when they don't have like a script for me to use. How am I supposed to know like how to have these conversations? And having coaching skills and knowledge, you might find, helps you to become more confident in these semi-structured conversations that are important, that are meaningful, and where you're wanting to honor the values and the ethos of your organization, your own values and ethos as well.
Just something that to bounce off what you were saying there in the different phases. That final phase of coach maturity is very existential, and you might be listening thinking too airy fairy, and like it's impossible to jump from beginning in coaching to what we're talking about in terms of these later stages of development. And I think why that's relevant is because not all coachees want that existential fertile void type coaching, or need it, or are ready for it. There are plenty of coachees who really need the more structured, tool-based coaching. The sorts of coaches that Joe and I might engage with, we would be looking for that level of coach maturity, like somebody who can really sort of see in our system and, help to bring to light these blind spots that our own reflective practice is limited by, because we do so much self-coaching. Having somebody at that stage of their development would be really enriching and liberating for us. We'd find it very frustrating working as a client with somebody who was, taking us through like the grow model or the clear model. So I think why I want to reiterate that is every phase of coach maturity is relevant, and the clients that you work with when you're first starting out to the clients that you might work with when you're 10, 15, 20 years in are going to be very different. You're going to attract different kinds of people to your practice as you evolve and as you grow. So hold that in mind as well, that who you are will change and who you serve will change.
I think also that coach maturity isn't about time served. It's about what you're able to integrate. And we see coaches that come on our coaching training that already have a high degree, like their approach is naturally very mature. They've come to coaching training because they have this connection to a systemic view of the world, the interconnectivity, the complexity of it, and they want to be able to work with that and develop the skills and the competencies to be able to do that. And so I think it's, you don't have to think, oh gosh, it was going to take me 10 years to, get to that phase. You might find that you already have that is already your relationship to coaching the world, your view of yourself in relationship to others, even if it is, as you were saying, Zoe, like we love to work with coaches and people that really rock our world, in terms of like, well, just ask us something. And so, sometimes it is taking us back to the basics. Sometimes it is something else. I can also get really frustrated with, a more existential approach, because that might not be what I need at that time. Tomorrow, 10 minutes later, may be perfect for me. So in any one session, I would benefit from, probably a little bit of all of those things. So I think when you're thinking about your coach maturity, it's knowing what your learning edges are, like knowing where you are in your journey, where you can go to, respecting those edges, leaning into them, getting the support to develop and grow, being able to hold the paradoxes that do exist in coaching, moving from that deep desire to help, and that being the primary thing, to partnering with your clients.
It's what you've got appetite for as well. definitely, me in my more earlier stages of development, this more existential kind of view of coaching, I wouldn't have been interested in. It wouldn't have really ignited what I was passionate about at that stage. So coach maturity isn't like a you have to tick all these phases. It's not. And maturity as well. I'm not, having had this conversation, I don't think I like the word maturity because it suggests that the other terms are immature, and that has different connotations. So that may be for another podcast, like what could we call this and these phases of development. But I hope what today's conversation has done is just to inspire some self-reflection around, oh, where am I, what do I relate to, what might be next for me, how do I see myself evolving as a coach. You may be at a point in your coaching journey where you feel a bit stale, or you feel like you've gone as far as you can, and that maybe this has ignited some thoughts in you around, oh, actually I haven't yet tapped into that, or I haven't yet experienced that. So yeah, we hope today's discussion has been valuable for you.
So, if you are interested in training to be a coach because you love the sound of like all of this to come, there's so much to look forward to and to learn, and you've got a complete learner mindset, you might find it useful to take our quiz, which is mycoachingcourse.com, and it will give you a good indication of what stage would be helpful for you to start at. If you are already a coach and you're like, oh my gosh, I think I'm still at phase one, I want to move into say phase two or phase three, and you're interested in exploring our CPD options, you can book a call with me at igcompany.com/CPD call.